I'll show you how to do that.
Take it from there. You got the mic. There you go. I don't really need to introduce Frank Wade because he's an old friend, and I think many of you are here because he is here. But this is the beginning of a series that we're going to do for much of this year, at least up until Lent. We're still just fourth Sundays because the Sunday school children get priority the other Sundays of the month until we have our parish hall reopen. And this series is entitled Applied Christianity. For those of you who may read with me. And Frank has been very gracious in helping me even shape the contours of this series. And so that was actually his idea. He may not remember that.
I remember the conversation.
And what we're going to try to do is think about the ways that Christianity takes us out into the world. And that's why we're going to have the phrase, the mission of God, applied to every single one of the topics we're considering. If we think not of our agenda for the world, but we think of our Creator's agenda for the world, and begin to ask, well, what is that agenda? And then seek to align ourselves with that agenda is kind of the point of the series. As we think about our mission to the world, we may not think of ourselves as on mission, but yet we are. The starting point is first asking God's mission for the world. So the topics are in many ways come out of our life and the things that are very much on our minds, especially in a year like this one. But also they come right out of Scripture. And so I'm very grateful that Frank is taking our first three in this series. So this first one, power, leadership, and mission of God. Where does power come from? Where do we get this idea of leadership, and therefore how do we implement it? We would get to be really risque and touch on politics. So stay tuned.
Okay, thank you, Tiffany. This seems a little loud. Is that? Is it the way it ought to be? Is there? I just think there's people across the street who might not want to be part of the forum today. But, well, thank you, Tiffany, and thank you all for being here. That does sound echoey and whatnot. Okay, now how are we? Can you hear me all right? You hear me okay? All right, good. Well, a couple of things. The longer Tiffany talked, the more trouble I realized I was in as she kept raising the ante in terms of what we were going to talk about today. But one correction that I want to make is that she said I was an old friend. I am a friend of yours of long standing. I am not, I'm sensitive to the possibility of being an old friend, and I want to be careful about that. As Tiffany said, this series is about leadership, power, and the mission of God. And what we're going to talk about today is life in service to God's design, the design principle of our life and the life that we share. We are at round tables because I'm going to talk for a little bit, and then I want you all to talk for a little bit, and you all over here, and the few that's the cream rises to the top, and so there's just a few people there to do that. But I'm going to talk, then you're going to talk, then we're going to share and see what we get. And as Tiffany said, the point is applied Christianity. It has to do with how our faith works out in the lives that we lead. So this Sunday, we're talking about life in service to God's design. And what we'll be doing specifically is stretching to connect the cosmos and the commonplace, beginning with an understanding of the cosmos and coming to our own lives and the commonplace in which we live. And so that's a big journey, as you might imagine, and we'll try to get that into place. And then the point is how you and I, in the commonplace of our life, might be able to serve God's design and the principles of God's design, and how we might serve it or not as we go along. Now, to understand God's design for creation, you have to consider the act of creation itself. That's where that begins. And it is a moment that can only be understood mythologically. There is no knowing about the Big Bang is a nice idea, but it doesn't really tell us much. You know, I've never heard anybody say what blew up in the first place. But anyway, the Big Bang is one thing. We have our own story in Genesis. It is, all of those things are mythological, which means that they do not grasp a truth, they simply point to it. And these are stories, accounts, and ideas that point to the truth as we are able to perceive it. And that's what we have there. So it says in our understanding of this, our faith understanding of this, that before creation all was chaos. The Bible tells us that it was without form and void, and darkness covered the deep. Images, mythological images of no creation, of nothing. A newer translation refers to it that all was welter and waste. Welter means turbulence, welter and waste, just things there, but not held together. And that the act of creation was to connect the disparate parts. The act of creation is to bring that into harmony, to take what would amount to a multiverse and create from it a universe of bringing these elements together. That's what God does in creation. Scientists, of which I am not one, but scientists call it dark matter that holds all things together, which is a scientific form of mythology because it simply points to a truth that they cannot grasp. But they're saying that all of this is held together by dark matter, and that is scientific mythology. So faith concludes that God is a gathering God, that's the instinct of our God, that God is a centripetal force as opposed to a centrifugal force. And, you know, for those of you who are pondering that, you know, centrifugal is when you were a kid and you took a bucket and swung it around over your head and the water didn't come out. That's centrifugal force. Centripetal force brings towards the center, comes towards the center. And that's what we understand to be the instinct of God. The design of God is centripetal, to bring things together in the center around God. And so that's what we understand and maintain, that we are not exactly sure what all that means, but that's the force that we identify and the force that we identify with. Now, there is no word and no phrase that can capture that design principle of God, but a salient part of it is in this word, which I will hold before you as being important to our conversation today, and that is connectedness. Connectedness. Now, connectedness is a word that has no academic panache whatsoever. You know, that you will, no professor likes to see a common word like that in a serious paper. You just wouldn't get away with it at all. But, you know, that's the way it goes. That's what it means, that things are connected, that connectedness is the principle of God's design. And if you think for a little bit about that idea of connectedness, you begin to realize that the words, the philosophies, the descriptions, the disciplines in our life use an abundance of words that are really about connectedness. Just think for a minute. The word universe itself is about connection. I'm going to ask you to add to this list, but justice is about appropriate connection between people. Compassion is about connection. Peace is about connection. Forgiveness is about connection. Integration is about connection. Inclusion is about connection. Ecology is about connection. Reconciliation is about it. Consistency is about it. The scientific methodology is based on that it's connected, that these things are connected, that if you find something that's true 5 times, it'll probably be true the 6th time. That connectedness makes scientific inquiry possible. And another word is love. Love is about connection, about appropriate connection between people. So all of those things come together and infiltrate through our life, our understanding of the world in which we live. And connectedness is also, moving it a little more theologically, is our basic understanding of the Trinity. That the idea that the very nature of God is rooted in the connectedness between the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and that those elements are enormously important in the nature of God and in the nature of creation. Now you can see I'm barely beating this subject to death here, because it's important, and that's what we're going to come back to. In the Gospels, Jesus' high priestly prayer, which is kind of a word salad really in the 17th chapter of John's Gospel, and that's a heresy, by the way. So if you're keeping track of those things, but I've never gotten it to make much sense. But when you read it slowly and carefully, one of the things that Jesus says in that is that the glory, which really means the essence of God, which includes the perfect unity of the Trinity, the essence of God, the glory that you, God, have given me. This is a prayer that he's addressed to God. The glory that you have given me, I have given them, meaning us. I have given them so that they may be one as we are one. Look at the principle. The glory that you gave me, the connectedness of the Trinity that you shared with me, I have shared with them so that they can be one the way you and I are one. Again, the principle of connectedness. And then you see it all the way through. The prodigal son. The prodigal son gets reconnected to his family. The Good Samaritan makes the right connection with the people around him. Jesus goes wandering across the barriers and divisions that separated people in his own culture, paid no attention to him whatsoever. He said to people, forgive 70 times 7. Stay connected. Make the connection work. The Feast of Pentecost that we celebrate here is all about all these people from different places finding out that they could, in fact, hear one another and become connected in a new and a powerful way. In that, and then ultimately in the balance of the New Testament is the kind of the ultimate stretch to make connection, which is the understanding that Gentiles could be included in the people of God, which in fact is something that the Hebrew scriptures understood to be anathema, that was not true at all, and the followers of Jesus found it to be true, which is ultimately the reason we got booted out of Judaism. So all of that, that's a whole other series we could talk about, but all of that is about connected, about things coming together. God's design works in nature, it works in plants, it works with minerals, it works with almost all animals because they all conform to their interdependence. But the human experience, you and me, the human experience added a distinct dimension, which is free will, agency. We get to choose in a way that other animals do not. We are created, like the rest of creation, to participate in the connectedness of God's design. That's the plan for us. But you and I have the ability to decide whether we want to participate or not. That is a privilege that is not given to aardvarks and zebras. They can't do that. Plants can't do that. We can do that. Human beings are the only ones who have the level of agency to participate in the connectedness of God's design and God's mission, taking the thing, that God's idea for us is that we will be part of that connectedness that is God's design, and we have the option to opt out of it in a way that no other creature, as far as we know, can ever do. Mark Twain once said that human beings are the only animals that can pray or need to, because we often opt out of that. The reality is contained in the story of the fall, another great mythological statement, the story of choosing self over connection. Choosing self over connection. The isolated me instead of the connected us. That's a whole other Bible study that we could do, but it's there before us. So connectedness is God's design. God's intent. It's God's design for creation. It is God's mission in terms of us, because we have the agency of free will and the option to opt out of it. And opting into God's plan is faith's mandate, that we will serve that And it gives us the road that we're supposed to be on. That's where Christianity begins to be applied in the keeping with the story of this course. So how do we opt in? So how do you do that? If the real idea behind creation is the connection between people, the idea is that it's supposed to be brought into harmony, the way the welter and waste of the land before creation is brought into some kind of harmony, then how do we serve that? Well, now, my friends, we are at the place where we get to talk to each other. Because, we've got one. I'm going to put you all together. You can get along. You can do it. Okay, yeah. Well, suck it up. I'm going to sit down. Okay, one there, 2, 3, 4, 5 tables. Okay. So the question is, how might a believer serve the connectedness of God, the intention of God, the mission, the plan of God in these contexts? Beginning over here, family. How might people do that in a family, in a community, table back there, workplace, over here, creation, and we're back to family here. Okay, got it? So, I want you to think about how can people do that? The point is, it's applied to Christianity. We're talking about God's intention, God's design. So on a practical level, how can people serve God's design in a family, a community, where did I go here? Community, in a workplace, in creation, and in family. Okay? So, you should take a few minutes and work that out, apply that Christianity, and then we're going to see what we got and come together. So, all right, have at it. And one thing is, just in the spirit of connectedness, if everybody there doesn't know your name, why don't you tell them what it is, and so you can introduce yourself around and do that, okay? Good morning. We're going to take about 10 minutes to do this. So you got about 10 minutes. take about 3 more minutes, and then we're going to come back and hear from you, okay? Take about 3 more minutes. Okay, are we getting close to wrapping up? We can begin to drift into a conclusion of some kind, or set of conclusions or something. No. We okay? All right. Okay. Thank you, Howard. Howard will go first. No, you're going last. You've got to pick first. I'm going to start off here. This is a precocious table over here. Now, you all were dealing with family. Is that right? Family. Okay, so what do we have? What do you think?
Well,
How might...
to stay connected, use technology.
What?
Use technology.
Use technology to stay connected.
Be intentional.
Be intentional.
Be perceptive. And what was that last one that we came up with?
Take the initiative.
Initiative. And what form would initiative take in this? What forms might initiative take? In the,
Phone call, visit, Zoom call.
Organizing emails to be together.
Setting up a Zoom call.
but yes, it obviously, I mean, it does. I mean, you don't want to...
The point is, you do it, people are in we had families, so people are in different stages of
Right.
life. And so if you're in a stage in life where you can reach out, like you have more time or whatever, you go ahead and do it, even if it's not returned.
Right.
Exactly the way you think.
Right, and I think that the question of return is a key one, because we're talking about serving God. Okay, it is God who expects us to show this initiative and the things that you're talking about, and you can't judge that by the response. Now, you don't want to be insensitive to that, but it's not because you reach out to Aunt Martha and Aunt Martha makes you feel good. You reach out to Aunt Martha because that's God's expectation of us in families to do that. Obviously, Aunt Martha's desires help us to know what's appropriate about that. There's the old story about the Boy Scout who got a merit badge for helping a lady across the street. He said it took him 20 minutes because she didn't want to go. So you want that kindness can be misdirected in that way, and it needs to have a little bit of sensitivity applied to it. But those are good things, and intentional is another good point, because You know, a family is a pervasive aspect of our life together, but it's not natural. You know, that which is natural, but by a certain definition, runs on God's energy. The seasons run on God's energy. The planets run on God's energy. The tides run on God's energy. We don't have to do anything about that. Families do not run on God's energy. You know, they're part of God's plan, but they need that intention. And that's a hugely important thing to make about that. That's a good job. Good job. And they were done before everybody else, so that's pretty good. So, all right. When we go to see, you all had nature. What did you have over at this table? Creation. What did you say? How do we participate in God's design and plan about creation? She said, apparently we're not very connected over here. So okay.
I think we were basically going on the premise that God has given us this gift of creation, and as Christians, it is our responsibility to care for the environment, and how we deal with the environment is also a reflection of our faith. Other people see us.
Okay, let me say that again, please.
Well, how we respond to the environment and take care of it is a reflection of our faith. And other people see us, if they know we're Christians, they see how we care for the environment and how we're leaving this to the next generation. And that's part of our responsibility is we don't just live in an isolated world. We have to care for
and we model a certain faith behavior by the way we care for the creation, which shows up in what you think about recycling, or are you thinking about, you know, planting trees, or what's the picture of that?
It's basically how we deal with our daily life. And, you know, it even comes back to, I have to think about, you know, like, I want to fly everywhere to go travel, and then you hear about all the gas that's being used and the pollution.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's just, it's this.
Oh, great. Well, good for you,
It's
Tiffany.
kind of a conundrum, like how far.
Why don't you hold that up to you?
How far do we go with our responsibility and our desires to have fun? And but people see us as Christians, and how are we dealing with that? Because I have family that lives in the South, and they don't even know what recycling is. It's just like,
Okay.
who cares? But it is our responsibility.
Okay. I have some friends who live in the North and don't know it either. But that's the one thing, just to touch on a point, which is not the point you were making, but I want to hold it up here, which is you began by saying, quite naturally, as anybody would, God gave us the gift of creation. And there's an important distinction to make here, which is that creation is not a gift given to us. All right? It doesn't belong to us. We have a role in it. We have a responsibility to God in it, but it's not here to entertain us. It's not here to, you know, to make our potato chips. It's not here for, you know, it's not ours to exploit or to use it. So that's a very fine point, and I know what you meant, and I don't mean to, I'm not arguing with what you meant. I'm taking one phrase and trying to hold it up to another point. Creation was not given to us. Right? Creation is an act of God, and we're allowed to participate in it, but it's not here for our benefit. That's not what makes it good, bad, or indifferent. You know, it's how it serves God's intention and design. But a good point. Well done, well done. It's part of my family over there, so I have to say that. Over here, this table, you all were dealing with what?
Community.
Community, yes, in the community. And so there's the microphone.
Well, I don't want to speak for everybody, but we first of all, observe that there are multiple communities, and you can define it in many ways. There's the community of Christ Church, there's the community of Georgetown, there's the community of Washington, D.C., and on and on.
Absolutely.
And the one, you know, my personal observation, and I'll give to the others, was that our son was married at Christ Church this weekend. And the fact that the Flower Guild and the Altar Guild, the volunteers were all personal friends of ours who voluntarily came out in force to make the beautiful flowers that are on the altar today. It was very, very touching, and I thought there was a real connectivity in that.
That's great. That feels good. That feels good. We got another voice here.
Yeah,
hot potato going around the table.
Yeah, I mean, I guess sort of more broadly, as we were talking about those kind of interlaced, interlocking communities, the idea that that connectedness in community is served by small and frequent acts of love, and that's what is binding the community together. Then to be the person who said it, I also said that I think there's a way in which our natural human tendency is to want to draw some boundaries around where we see our community might be, and such is a fallen world. But I think it's interesting to sort of decide where we want to limit what our acts of connectivity are within a community as much as where we want to embrace them.
It's a good point. It's an excellent point. I think a couple of things come to mind. One is that a community is, by definition, confined. When you say the community of Georgetown, that's Georgetown. Obviously, the community of Washington's another place. It's not Pittsburgh. So it has a definition, and the question of how we deal with that and how we deal with those multiple elements. Another piece of it. Anybody else at this table? Do you all represent it? Well, another piece of that. This is where Tiffany said that we could, with fear and trembling, talk about politics. Because politics is our community, our whole community as a nation, trying to make a decision. And I hope I won't upset you by suggesting we're not terribly good at it. We basically commit the error that you're talking about, sir. Of that's them and this is us, and a question of how we hear, how we understand, how we take the initiative of family that they were talking about here, in order to understand a person whose view is different from your own. And it seems to me, that is a pursuit of connectedness. That is a proper thing to do, whoever that other happens to be. And when you start on it and you say, well, why would I want to know what those idiots are saying? The answer is they're your idiots. We are. God has connected us. God has connected us, and in faithful to that, there is some seek to understand. And it doesn't mean that after understanding that you wouldn't necessarily, well, I still think you're an idiot, but at least there would be an understanding about it. There's a principle in households, in marriages, especially that, and with people who disagree, and the principle there is that is about the difference between a disagreement and a misunderstanding. And a disagreement is that when I know what you're talking about, I could state your position to your satisfaction. I may not agree with it, but I can say, okay, I understand that you feel your opinion is 1, 2, 3, 4. And you say, right, Frank, that's 1, 2, 3, 4. That's right. And then I can say, I don't agree with that. Fine. That's a disagreement. A misunderstanding is, I really don't know what you're talking about, but I still say I disagree with you. And basically what happens then is that you will assume that the problem is volume, that you need to talk louder to me or shout at me. And the fact is, I don't know what you're talking about. And so any response that I make is going to miss because I don't actually know what you're saying. So I miss it, and a misunderstanding simply spirals downward. A disagreement you can build on. I'm looking at you like I disagree. I really don't know you, so I don't know. but the thing is that in seeking to understand that what we want are healthy disagreements, not a kingdom of misunderstandings. So it's to seek to be able to say, the way this person understands this situation is this, and to state that in a way that person would say, yeah, that's what I think. That's the basis, and that's part of the work of making that particular community work, which is not the point you all were making. So I'm not taking exception to that, but they're excellent points. And part of the reward is what Tom's talking about, which is that this is my team. They showed up for me, and it feels good to be part of a community like that, to do that. That's a good thing, a great thing. Okay, good. You want to hand that back there and you all were talking about, what was your?
We were talking about the workplace.
Workplace, yes. Okay. There, Jack, get it? Okay. Watch your coffee coming there. All right.
There were 3 or 4 themes that popped up. First of all, I mean, is workplace, like in your office or business location, or is it the economy? So we're all over the lot.
Well, it's a big arena.
The common themes were AI, ethics, online meetings, and free markets.
Okay.
Oh, and empathy.
And
Empathy.
empathy, yes.
Forgetting it shows that I had no empathy.
Okay.
The AI is obvious. Connectedness implies with people, and AI brings us connecting with machines, but not knowing that they're machines. We didn't have a lot more, but it's pretty
Yeah,
obvious.
how
that-
can you do that then? How does that fracture community, do you think? AI in principle, does it?
Well, if the goal of the person directing the machine is misunderstanding, then yes, it does.
Yeah,
fracture.
it would. It's a great tool for misunderstanding, right? Yeah, okay. Good point.
Online meetings cut both ways. During the pandemic, if we couldn't have online meetings, we'd have had just the people in our own household
Yeah.
for months on end. But now, the ability to have online meetings keeps many in the workplace from connecting with each other, physically connecting.
It does. It does.
Free market. A free market, think supply and demand. If there's a product in the marketplace and you're connected with it in your workplace, in the private sector, typically, what determines how much you pay for something and whether it's available is how everything comes together in sort of a neutral way. If there's not much supply, then you're going to have to pay more for it. If there's a lot of supply, then you're going to pay, and so on. But we're in an era in which, particularly in the area of drugs, but in other areas, prices have gone up because of power behind the scenes and free markets not working. So not just doubling and tripling, but in the drug arena, some prices have gone up by 30, 50 times because of machinations that interrupt these free markets. I did online meetings. Oh, and the ethics, yeah, we had an interesting dialogue. Pardon me for those younger, so I'm just the reporter here. But ethics not being discussed in the workplace by the younger generation was put forward. Well, my own experience is ethics discussed a lot, particularly if you're in a workplace that has a regulator or an auditor, because there's somebody else who comes in to take a look at what's happening. So anyway, that's a rundown.
Okay. That's good. Empathy
Did
was
you want
the
to
other
say
one.
anything?
Empathy was the other one. Did they? Okay, you got it. I think that's really good. And I think, that the question of ethics not being discussed by young people, I didn't know that my generation exactly beat it to death either. I think to be aware of the ethical responsibilities, and I think for us as people of faith that that faith is a stronger word than ethics and covers a lot of the same territory. That our responsibility to the other human beings with whom we live and share this planet is hugely important. Another piece that seems to me that applies in the marketplace is that there is a kind of a mythical and absent customer that's out there someplace that you probably in the workplace don't see because the person who buys your product, if you're depending on the structure of it, but a person who buys your product, you probably don't see them that much. If you're talking about being at the headquarters of IBM. Now, if you're running a hardware store, yes, you see your customers, but people don't see their customers, and it's easy for them to become ethereal, to be not real. A great deal of the problem, the way people were able to function so destructively about the opioid epidemic was that I don't think they ever had a picture of, I assume, the people that they were affecting. That they were asking questions that went this far and the suffering was this far. And that they were asking one set of questions, which were questions of business and other things like that. And we're not counting what was happening out here to this group of people. So that's the shortness of vision in terms of who's the customer, who's being affected by the work of this workplace is, I think, an ethical question and becomes for us as Christians a faith question to apply in that and asking a large enough question. Who's benefiting from this? Who's getting hurt by? Who's paying the real price of this? What we're doing. That would be true for the artificial intelligence, misuse of information in that setting too. So that's great. Thank you. All right, come on over here. Can we get send a microphone over here to the table about family again?
Frank, it shouldn't surprise you that we failed in answering your question. Not that we don't
Okay,
agree
moving the
with
microphone on along.
many
then.
of the things that the other group talked about. I will take initial responsibility when I asked the group at the start, how are we defining family?
Not a
And
bad
is
question.
it
Okay.
the de Tocqueville American nuclear family
Yeah.
that we all had to read about in college? And,
Right.
or is it a series of rings, as Kim says, as it expands? And by the way, my co-conspirators here can contribute anytime they would.
Okay,
They
all
would.
right,
They
fine.
would.
No, that's
they
a good,
would
that's
like
a good
to.
question.
Howard and I either have a disagreement or a misunderstanding.
So we started more peeling the onion back than coming up with resolution for it. And what are some of the components that have had that nuclear family disintegrate, mostly in the current generation? Two income earners, a lack of time and energy to pay attention to the children, single parents for whatever reason, again, having to work and lack of attention at home, not anybody's fault. The nature of the independence of a married couple, if it's a two-income earner, and who's supposed to be making sure that they're eating their peas, that they have their napkin in their lap, that you actually even sit down at 6:30, as most of us did when our parents came home, and had a dinner. How was your day? Just a lot of little things like that are non-existent on a broader scale around here. Okay, did I leave anything out?
Yeah, if.
Sure.
Yeah, it's good. Okay, Tom. Okay, Tom, go ahead.
I completely agree with Howard, who has long been my spiritual advisor. My take on it is, and we had to reread the question 3 or 4 times, and I couldn't read my handwriting the first time around. How might a believer serve the mission of God in family to enhance connectedness? So, given my perspective, the family is the basic political unit in society.
Okay.
And, well, and I think that's true. Maybe
Yeah,
it's the
okay,
individual,
yeah.
I don't know.
Sure, yeah.
But given the unchurching of America, given the confusion over right, wrong, good, bad values, one wonders and one can hope that moral, civil, and social values might be taught somewhere. And if it's not taught in the family, it's not going to be done in the workplace, schools, government, the Boy Scouts of America. Because in many of those places, it's illegal to teach or convey values. So if it's not done in the family, it's not going to get done. And my final point is, if you go look at, and you can recite them, or Howard can, baptismal values. I'm sorry, vows.
Vows,
Baptism to
right.
Nurture and raise this child in the admonition of the Lord.
Yeah.
That's what it boils down to. And sometimes that takes courage and time.
Yeah, it does, and I that's That's excellent and very helpful. And I'm connecting it to what you all said about family, which is that it involves an intentionality. It's a step you have to take. In reflecting on that, it's not natural. It doesn't run on its own energy. And you're talking about the fact that it's not running on the absence of that energy, and that's true. And it comes back to part of what we looked at as a community. How does a community respond to that reality? Well, I don't know, and if I did, I'd be famous and you wouldn't know me. I'd be high and lifted up. But I think that in any major endeavor in life, like being faithful to God, draws greater energy from a good question than it does from a good answer. So a group of people, like this room full of people, who set out into the world in which we live, wondering how we can be part of how God would address that lack that you're identifying, or the living in an environment as you're identifying. How can I be part of that? That's a very powerful question. Now, those of us who are in families know that that if you get up in the morning and you say, well, all right, how can I love my spouse? Well, if your answer is, well, I'm gonna butter my own toast. I'm gonna kiss her on the forehead when I leave. I'm gonna call if I'm gonna be late. Those are very nice things to do, but they're deadly if that's your answer to how can I love you. The person who rises in the morning and with the question, how can I love you today, is enormously empowered by everything that goes on. By the same token, the Christian who goes out into the world raising the question, how can I be part of what God wants done in this place? How can I be part of what God's mission and design is carrying with them an enormously powerful tool. An enormously powerful tool. The person who answers it and says, I can be part of the environment by recycling the trash. That's a very nice thing to do. But if that's your answer, you're dead after that. The question is the powerful thing. So I don't know the answer to the things that you all raised, but I think that people who are equipped with the question are the very people that God can best use to address those things. Because there are enormously, as Tom pointed out, legal things, ethical things. I can't go next door and say you're doing a lousy job of raising your children, even though everybody in the neighborhood knows it. There's some limits there about what we can do, but the question, how can I help? How can I be part of God's design, is an important and empowering question for anybody who undertakes, to be a servant of the mission of God in this world. Okay, you all did a good job. We are at the point where we need to go and go to church and take the questions before us. But any parting shots? Any that you want to put in there? Okay. Yes, sir.
It's really beautifully put about the power of the question. It really resonated with a line in the gospel today about the disciples didn't understand what Jesus said, but were afraid to ask.
Uh-huh. Right.
And I
Oh,
think
yeah.
that
Okay.
there's
There's
an
a
important
microphone
point. Yeah.
that they were afraid to ask. And
Yes.
yeah. And that's always made me wonder about the nature of Jesus. I mean, we see Jesus, gentle, mild, little sheep and all that kind of stuff. And these big guys are scared to ask him a question. I don't know.
Yeah. But I think, possibly because one has an idea of what the answer might be,
Yes,
is why
right.
you don't want to ask
That's
the question.
right.
Yeah.
That's another point. I'm not going to ask the question because I don't want to know the answer to that one. Yeah, because when you're sitting in a situation, we've all done this. You see a situation when you know that a truth needs to be spoken. There's a thing here that's going on, and somebody needs to say something, and you realize if you say, well, who should speak up, that the answer might be Frank, and I don't want to hear that. So I sit here and say, gosh, these people are mixed up and messed up, and it's a powerful thing. But the question is a powerful thing. Well, we are at the parting time. Tiffany, thank you for are we not?
Take 5 more minutes.
Oh, can we go clear to 11? Oh, is it 11? Okay, I thought we had to be through by 11.
Are there a few other questions?
Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, well, we brought it together, so we're
All
done.
right, there we
Okay,
go.
thank you
All
all
right,
very
thank
much.
you.